on camera, please disable your video, and if you're not speaking or participating in the discussion, please keep yourself on mute. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box to share them with us. And in the meantime, feel free to introduce yourselves and share where you're joining us from. I think it's always interesting for our guest speakers to see where you're all tuning in from. So today, oops, that's the wrong. We're going to start with our guest speaker from the Youth Leadership Council at Earth Eco International. Then we will have some time for a brief Q&A session for any questions you might have for Artash. And then we'll have our breakout groups like we usually do for a brief discussion with our peers. And then we'll regroup. And then the second half of the session, we'll have some time for a Q&A session about the program, about your final project, any questions you might have related to ArcGIS or story maps or any of the technical sessions that we've presented over the past couple of weeks. So that's the agenda for today. And without further ado, I am going to hand it over to our guest speaker, Artash, to introduce himself, his organization, and the wonderful work that he is doing. So let me just share his slides. Because Artash is joining us from a conference in DC, so I'll be going through the slides for him. Artash, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mariam. Great to be talking at this camp and this session. You know, it's really encouraging to hear that so many high schoolers and middle schoolers are interested and, you know, passionate about pursuing ocean advocacy and ocean technology. So I'm really excited to be sharing a bit about, you know, my work as well as the Youth Leadership Council of Earth Echo. So I'm Artash. I am an incoming grade 12 student from Toronto, Canada. I'm currently in DC, as said by Mariam. So in 2021, I joined the Earth Echo Leadership Council. And the reason behind this is that I am very passionate about solving big problems in ocean sciences around the world. So what is Earth Echo? Well, Earth Echo is a global movement and a nonprofit which focuses on bringing global youth voices to protect and restore our planet. And at the center of Earth Echo is the Earth Echo Youth Leadership Council, or YLC. And the YLC combines around 12 students every year, both from the US and from countries all around the world, to provide a youth voice to Earth Echo's activities on educating young people all around the world. So, you know, these countries range from several cities in the US, Canada, and all the way to Indonesia, which is really awesome because having a diverse group of voices when it comes to global issues is super important. So Earth Echo's programs are designed to educate young people around the world and bring a vision where everyone's backgrounds and you know, opportunities and tool sets and skill sets can be brought together to create a larger movement. So one of the Youth Leadership Council's flagship programs is the Earth Echo Youth 30 by 30 program. And this program is designed to bring youth voices to the initiative to protect 30% of our oceans by 2030, primarily through, you know, marine protected areas and better policies. And through the YLC, we've reached over 20,000 youths from around the world from over 30 plus countries through these training programs, including the Earth Echo Water Challenge, which has collected over 1 million observations over the past decade. Another thing that the YLC does is working on restoration projects in their local communities. So since everyone is scattered around the world and everyone can undertake their own projects in their own areas. So some of these include, you know, restoring habitats, mangrove planting, invasive species removal, and the planting of native species in new environments. the final pillar of Earth Echo and the Wild Seas work is on policy, which is really connecting back to what I'm passionate about as well, because I believe connecting technology and information to policy is the way to go for changing the way we do things. So last year, in fact, members of the Youth Leadership Council talked to members of Congress on ocean policy last year. So that was really cool. Finally, since the Wild Seas goal is oriented on youth leadership, the new program that has come up within the Wild Sea is Gen C. So Gen C has over 1,200 members from over 100 countries. And Gen C provides a digital platform where young leaders working on oceans around the world can come together, get access to training resources, and really do more peer-to-peer collaboration and discussions. So that's what the YLC does in a nutshell. I'd really encourage you to check out the Earth Echo and the Youth Leadership Council website if you want more information on that. Now, I want to transition to a bit about the work that I do. Since this whole session is on technology and the SDGs, it aligns very well with my own work. I love using data and technology to solve big problems. And I want to give you guys a bit of a template on a project that I am doing that combines both of these subjects together and perhaps inspire you on ways that you can also use technology and information, as you're probably already doing in this course, to tackle policy and environmental issues. So the one that I focus on in my project is ocean noise pollution. So you must know how ships traverse the oceans to bring goods and cargo from different countries to another. In fact, shipping provides 80% of global trade by volume every year. And more ships are traversing the waters every year as the population increases. Why is this an issue? Well, apart from many environmental pollution factors created by ships, one of them that is often overlooked is ocean noise pollution. So the engines and the propellers on ships create underwater noise. Now, ships are the only underwater noise source in the water. There's also geophony, which is the natural sounds of the earth that you might hear, like rain, wind, and seismic activity on the seafloor also creates sounds underwater. And more importantly, biophony. So marine mammals like whales, fish, shrimp, and even certain aquatic species also use sound underwater. Next slide, please. We can move to the slide. So underwater noise from ships is rising every year. Unfortunately, this noise overlaps with the sounds that marine mammals like whales and dolphins use for communication, navigation, mating, and other activities. Because in the darkness of oceans, marine mammals cannot see very well. So sound becomes the primary way that marine mammals talk to each other and find food. So as more noise from ships is in the water, marine mammals have a harder time doing this. And this has increased the risk of collisions between marine mammals and ships. Now, entering the COVID-19 lockdowns. Unfortunately, as shipping noise rises every year, it's very hard to establish perhaps you could say a baseline of what underwater noise levels would look like without shipping. Now, this is where the COVID-19 pandemic provided an interesting opportunity. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, shipping traffic reduced significantly around the world, which means so less ships were in the water, and my hypothesis was that ocean noise would also have decreased. So I wanted to find a way to be able to monitor the effect that ships have on the underwater noise levels around the world. So to start about this, how can we measure ocean noise? Well, in my case, I turned to technology, specifically hydrophones. Hydrophones are like underwater microphones that can, hear or record underwater noise levels across the years. So I used 7 different hydrophones in my project from global observatories in the US, Canada, Europe, and even in Australia, so I could get a good geographical representation. You guys were talking about GIS data earlier. So, in all these projects, it's very important to get a global perspective, especially in oceans, since, oceans don't respect national boundaries. So we all need to be working together to be able to solve these issues. When looking at hydrophone data, there's a lot of steps that need to be taken in analyzing this data and extracting the noise created by shipping traffic. So these hydrophones sample recordings at a very, very high rate. So the first thing that I did was resample the hydrophone data to 2 kilohertz, which means I'll be able to analyze sound data up to 1000 hertz. Hertz is like the frequency of the sounds underwater. And ships create underwater noise at around 63 hertz. So I wanted to extract the underwater noise at the 63 hertz third octave band. Then, after resampling, I calculated long-term spectral averages, which allowed me to get the noise at different frequency levels across the year. I used other techniques, including data from wind buoys, to remove the effect that wind has on my data sets. And finally, I extracted the underwater noise created by ships in the lower frequency bands for over 25 years of data from 7 hydrophone stations. Throughout my project, I use several technology packages. Some of you, or a lot of you, probably know how to code in Python. So I did the entire analysis in Python itself. The code is available online. I'll get to that later as well. Pandas, Excel, Jupyter Notebooks, NumPy, SciPython, and I even use more visualization libraries to be able to make my analysis and data available to the general public. Calibration. So when looking at data from the environment and looking at data that occurs in the real world, one thing that you need to take into consideration is that natural and real world data is very, very noisy. So, there's a lot of things that you need to do to make sure your data is cleaned up and ready for analysis. In my case, I realized that wind also affected ocean noise levels, but I only wanted to look at the noise created by ships. So I had to work on different algorithms that I used to remove the effect that wind has on the data sets. So I did that by discarding certain days and certain time periods when winds were higher or lower than average. The main result I was able to pull from my project was that ocean noise did indeed decrease across all the stations in my study, which proved that slowing down ship traffic or a decreased level of shipping is an effective way to reduce underwater noise levels. So these noise decreases range from 7 decibels in Georgia Strait, which is up near Vancouver on the west coast of Canada, down to 1 or 2 decibels in Monterey Bay in the Pacific Ocean side as well. Going back to the point that I mentioned earlier about shipping noise interfering with marine mammal calls, I was able to find the intersections of whale vocalization, dolphin vocalization, and shipping noise in the dataset. I do have a short video where you can hear both the noise from marine mammals and from shipping. I'm not sure if sound is playable on this thing. Perhaps you could try. It's probably not.
Are you able to hear?
No, I think
Okay.
when you share, there's an option that says share with
Yeah,
sound, right?
let me try again. Share sound. Ooh. I think I might need to change my settings because I don't think it's going to share the audio.
Awesome. Yeah, great that the video was able to play. So yes, indeed, the shipping noise, as you can hear, is very loud, artificial, and jarring. And on the other hand, you could also hear the sounds from the marine mammals, specifically in this case, the dolphins. So dolphins use whistles to communicate with each other, since dolphins are very, very social creatures, as you may have heard. So it's very clear how this loud shipping noise can block, the communication between dolphins and overshadow these whistles. And that's why it's such a big problem. And looping back to how technology can be merged with environmental protection. So the big idea here would be how can we reduce the effect that ships have on the marine mammal communication? So you can't just come up with ideas and try to test them out. So you need a solid data and scientific evidence that shows that perhaps this method, perhaps less shipping or slower shipping can decrease noise. So in my case, I used the COVID-19 pandemic to show that reduced shipping traffic does indeed reduce shipping noise and can be an effective strategy to reduce the effect this has on marine mammals and help marine mammals regrow their populations. Go to the next slide. So to communicate my scientific evidence and results, I made a web app, monitormyocean.com, because research alone is not enough. Research needs to be connected to a wider audience and in such a way that everyone, policymakers, youths can understand what you're doing. So I've created the app, monitormyocean.com. Feel free to check it out, where I've made all my analysis available. And the app was also endorsed by the United Nations as a UN Ocean Decade activity. Going back to policy decisions, now my next goal and my ongoing work has been on using the data and analysis that I found in my project to talk to policymakers on how we can come up with better strategies to reduce underwater noise. And once we do have these strategies, how can I use my work and my website to make sure that these policies are working and reducing shipping noise? So another big problem is that hydrophones, the underwater microphones I used in my study, are not easy to maintain because they're expensive and need to be cabled to the bottom of the ocean floor. So one thing I'm also working on is crowdsourcing ocean noise monitoring. So creating cheaper hydrophones that citizen scientists and youths around the world can deploy in different regions. Like recently, I was talking to the 11th Hour Ocean Racing Team, which is a sailing team that races around the world in different races. And they go to very remote regions where deploying a hydrophone would be really useful. So I've been entering talks with different organizations. I've also been appointed to the International Quiet Ocean Working Group on low-cost hydrophones, where I can join more ongoing discussions on making this data and making these tools available to everyone, not just in North America and Europe, but also in developing countries all around the world. Because as I said, ocean sciences and ocean preservation is a global issue that even disproportionately affects countries that have contributed less to ocean noise pollution. I think this is the end of the presentation slides, right? Is there any other slides after this? Yes. So another thing you have to take into consideration is that, yes, all around the world, we have taken steps to greener energy. And this perhaps means electronic cars, electronic vehicles, solar and wind power. But at the same time, you need to look at this holistically. As we have more green energy, we also need more batteries. And more batteries means more metals like lithium, copper, nickel, and manganese. And unfortunately, we are running out of surface level minerals for these batteries. And this has mounted a pressure on companies to look at deep sea mining, which means dredging the ocean floor for metal-rich modules. And unfortunately, the UN and different organizations like the International Maritime Organization and the Seabed Authority have failed to come up with effective safeguards to either place a moratoria, which means stopping and halting deep sea mining until we have more scientific evidence about how it could affect ecosystems. And perhaps even by next year, companies may start the continual exploring of the deep sea to mine different materials. And you can imagine if we have a big machine scraping the seafloor for minerals, that will definitely have a negative impact on marine mammal species and will also increase ocean noise. So I've been looking at different ways to deploy hydrophones and monitor ocean noise in these zones that have been targeted for deep sea mining. Uh, so that's the end of my presentation. I hope I was able to give you a good idea on how technology and data can play a role in environmental protection and showing policymakers and keeping policymakers accountable. I'd encourage you to read more on the Youth Leadership Council and Earth Echo website about more ocean advocacy, and check out my website, monitormyocean.com, for more information about my project. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Artash. Congratulations on leading such an incredible project. It's absolutely fascinating. And I think my colleagues and I at SDGs today would love to connect with you to see how we can share this work through our platform as well. So we'll follow up with you bilaterally. But before Artash has to leave, are there any questions from our students for Artash?
If there aren't any questions from the students, I had a quick question about what adoption looks like for these policies, or if you've thought about how to, maybe if it's difficult to convince politicians and policymakers how important this is in comparison to the issues like energy crises or water crises, et cetera. How do you go about advertising this, so to speak?
For sure. Well, as you mentioned, there are a variety of ocean issues, and that's why we need so many different youth movements to go in parallel and tackle all these issues simultaneously, since they're all equally important to creating a better planet and preserving our oceans. So to advertise this, as I said, I made the app. I've also written a lot of cold emails, to policymakers. I'm in touch with my local policymaker in Toronto, or where I live. And I also attend conferences like at the UN Ocean Conference, where I can represent youth voices and bring new ideas to policymakers and people who attend these conferences. Another thing I do is contact media agencies so I can talk about the work that I'm doing on air. And this brings a louder voice to what I'm doing and encourages policymakers to enter discussions. And depending on governments, a lot of policymakers are very encouraging regarding youth work in this area. And joining other organizations, Earth Echo has a lot of policy reach as well, is an important step in that as well. So really, network approaches and connecting bilaterally with other movements is a key part of what I do as well.
Would anyone like to unmute and ask a question, or I think I can read through the chat? Feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourselves. Go ahead, Lara.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing this. This is like so inspiring. Like, I think for most of us, we aspire to be like that one day, making our own projects and so. But also I wanted to ask, like, well, I asked in the chat, but like, what's your major in college, or what are you studying, or what do you think, well, what will be your recommendations for, to study, to pick a major for us that we want to like help with the whole sustainability track?
Thank you for your question, Lara. Well, currently I'm entering 12th grade, so my final year of high school. So I'm still deciding on what major I want to pursue. I would recommend exploring all the options, such as what I'm doing. So myself, I want to pursue ocean engineering, which means having a better handle on creating innovative solutions, both software and hardware related, in oceans. But everyone has their own skill set and own interests, and all these interests can be used to tackle ocean issues. So all of you, I think, are still in middle school and high school, which is great because you're starting at a very early age. So getting into this, finding what inspires you, visiting these universities, seeing what kind of labs they have is a great way of going about it. I like engineering because it's more hands-on and I love lab work. So that's why I'm going to environmental engineering.
Go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation. I think as Laura said, I found it really inspiring, and this pertains more to, I guess, what you talked about in the beginning, but I was wondering if you've seen like disproportionate impacts on like different species of fish or like marine animals versus fish.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So marine mammals and fish. So when we look at fish, for example, the main factor that's pushing fish population down is overfishing, right? So companies around the world that are overfishing because of growing demand and unsustainable fishing practices. On the other hand, ocean noise may not have such a direct impact on fish as much as it does on marine mammals, because marine mammals are species that actually rely on sound and sonar a lot more for communication. So there's a disproportionate effect on these marine mammals, especially blue whales, North Atlantic right whales, which are found on the east coast of the US, like in the Stellwagen Bank region. I believe you guys in America, you call that the New England region in the US. So there's only, I think, 300 or 400 of those left in the water. So it's a highly endangered species. On the other coast of the US, we have the southern resident killer whales, which is also having a very low population at the moment. So that's why it's important to focus on those species that are the most endangered and go from there.
Anvi, go ahead.
I was interested in learning like what really sparked your interest in this like issue, and like what motivated you to like stay on this path and like make an app about it and like yeah, really pursue this interest.
Hi, Envy. So what started, or kickstarted my path into this? It was quite a while ago, actually. So as a kid, I was always interested in space. In fact, right now I'm at a NASA space conference in DC for a bit. And space always interested me because space is kind of unknown, right? It's dark, it's mysterious. Um, and I loved working on space data back then. So making model rovers, uh, looking at NASA data sets, and really playing around with it. And at the same time, learning coding from local organizations and online courses. But then, why did I transition to oceans? Well, you might think oceans and space are kind of different, and that is true. But at the same time, both oceans and space are mysterious, unexplored, and extreme environments, right? In fact, we have less studies done on the deep sea than we do than of a space. So oceans was a really unexplored topic for me, and it seemed like something that was really worth pursuing because oceans account for 50% of the carbon absorption from human pollution. So 2020 to 2030 is also the UN Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development. So it really aligned with my interest in that way. I decided, hey, why not pursue oceans, ocean in protection as a topic? And I've stayed encouraged by looking for opportunities around me, talking to people who have done more work in the subject than me, learning from them, and working with them to get more opportunities and more access to information in those areas. It is sometimes hard for students to be able to get good careers, pursue good careers in these kind of topics. But the important part, one big takeaway is networking. Getting a job through conventional applications is not something that you would do anymore. You really want to focus on having connections and being able to work with other people to be able to pursue your career.
Thank you, Artash. Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves. I don't see any other questions, but I think Artash shared his contact information, and we can share it in a follow-up email for anyone who'd like to connect and continue the conversation with him. Artash, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to share your incredible work with us. And we'll definitely be in touch to collaborate with you on a few items, and also make sure that our students are connected with you as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Good luck, everyone, on the summer course. And I have my contact details with Mariam, so feel free to reach out. Good luck, and I have to dip back to the conference, but have a good one, everyone.
Thank you, Artash. Okay, so Tim, do you want to facilitate the breakout sessions? We can have our discussions in our smaller groups, and then we'll regroup for those who just joined. We'll regroup and answer any questions you might have about the course, about ArcGIS, or any of the training that has been offered over the past few weeks.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, great.
And hello, everyone. Hi again. As you know, this group is for any questions or any sort of debriefing or discussions you'd like to have. So feel free to go for that.
Yes, I had a question about our project, but I was wondering, like, at what stage should we be? I've only just like selected a topic, but we should be sort of like started on them.
So, sorry, let me just be clear on your question. You're wondering about whether you should have started or not, or how that looks, or?
I guess what the general like timeline looks. Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna have office hour sessions in the next coming weeks, which are basically these time periods that we usually have for these meetings are going to be set aside for independent work or group work that you guys will be doing on your projects. And if I had to give a really hard deadline, I would say by the end of the sessions, so by the end or late August. So you have at least a month, right, to do all this stuff. That being said, if you have your license, if you have everything like that, and it's all settled, you can begin your work at any point. So there's no set starting date. You can start at any point if you know what you want to do. But definitely by the end of August, I think we should have something to show. And as I mentioned, there will be free time given in office hours days for this and for next month as well, next couple of weeks. So let me know if that sounds good.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. How's everyone else's projects going? How long would you say the project should be? That's a good question. I don't necessarily know if there's any specific time that the project should take, or at least in terms of uh how long they should look. I think you should aim to completely have your topic fleshed out, right? So if I, as a random person or as a person who's not informed on the topic at hand, wants to look at your presentation and your project in order to learn more about how it works or what it is or who it affects, I think your project should be able to show people that in completion, right? So you should introduce your project, introduce your topic. You should go into the problem at hand. You should go into issues that you're looking to fix it, maybe future considerations, and then all throughout the way, pave your way with evidence, pave your way with stories, pave your way with data. So I would definitely say that. I hope that answers your question, Cooper. Um, I think I'll put the schedule for you guys as well, so that way you guys can see when exactly we are going to be set up for these office hours and for the given time for the project. All right, so week 10, August 22nd, August 24th, that would be the final project presentations. Your presentation should, at the very least, just do what I was talking about, where it gives the overview and gives the data and gives the problem at hand and what we can do to solve it, right? Like definitely focus on the problem, how we're solving it, and how we're collecting data in order to do both of those things.
I had a question about office hours.
Yeah. What's up?
I was wondering if they were like mostly for like tech related like discussions, or is it just like general help on our projects?
Well, so August 22nd and 24th are the last days. Those are the project presentations, right? So that's when you're actually showing them. But in the weeks before that, and I'm pulling up the other schedule for that now, is that um the week of, let's see, it will be the week of August 15th and then August 17th and then the next week. So you'll have at least 2 weeks of office hours. And then, of course, you can bring up these questions in the breakout groups if you're doing your work on your own free time, which I recommend you do if you want to take the pressure off of this timeline. You can come to these breakout sessions with questions. And after this breakout group, we're actually going to have a Q&A, I think, for the projects. So I'll be able to give everyone this information. And I think other people might benefit from this question as well. So feel free to ask the question when we're in the bigger group again, and then maybe we can evaluate how that looks for everyone as well. So
Sounds good.
awesome, thank you. It looks like, right, so we still have new information up until week 8, and then week 9 is entirely office hours. So that will be August 8th is the last day. August 8th is the last day that we'll have new information coming in, right? And then the rest from August 8th until August 22nd or 24th, you'll have time to work on the projects. Again, like I said, if you want to start working on it now, I'd highly recommend it. I don't know exactly how difficult some projects will be depending on what the topic is and how ArcGIS data looks for them. So definitely start at a time that is reasonable for you, right? Okay.
Do we have everyone back?
We should soon. Everyone in.
Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. I think we had a lot of great questions in our group, and it seems like there might be some questions that have overlapped in our discussions. So we can use the next 15 minutes to answer any questions you might have about the program, about the final project, about ArcGIS. But before I open the floor to questions, maybe I can just remind everyone that the theme of the summer program this year is very much focused on climate. There are a lot of global agendas, not only related to the SDGs, but we have COP28 coming up in the fall. And so we were hoping that this could provide some inspiration for you guys to choose topics related to climate that you're passionate about or would like to address in your communities. So the weekly themes that we kind of defined were based on Professor Sachs's book, The Age of Sustainable Development. And so we discussed in our group about, topics or themes that different teams or students can focus on. And so while climate is one of those topics that's very much related and connected to all of the SDGs in some ways. So I think no matter the topic, there's always an angle that could be related to that. So we do encourage you to select topics or solutions that are related to climate, as we will have the opportunity to showcase your work at upcoming international events. So we're hoping to review all of your submissions and select some of the story maps to be featured at these international conferences and events. So once you do submit your final project or your final story map at the end of August, our team will be reviewing them and we'll be in touch with you about any potential follow-ups or revisions that we might need to work on together in September. So that's just what I wanted to point out. Are there any questions related to either any of the tools you're working with or kind of the timeline or the final project? And maybe I can just remind everyone that you can find, I'll share the link in the chat. You can find more information about how students from our previous programs have created their story maps and some of the resources that they used. So I'm just going to share that in the chat. And on that same website, you can access data sets and other examples that might influence your projects.
Just to say that my group had some questions about the timeline for the projects, right? So I kind of went over to say that there is no specific start date. Obviously, you all hopefully have your licenses, and if you don't, please say that so we can get that fixed. But there's no specific start date, but I would recommend that you start, as soon as possible. And then the last day we have is the 24th of August. The last week 10 is the 22nd and the 24th. So those are our presentation days. The week before that will be the office days. That would be August 15th and August 17th. And if anyone has any questions about timeline, or some people had questions about the length of the presentation, which I think Marion, you might have a better idea for than I do, but those are the kind of questions I got. So if anybody has those as well, go for it.
Yeah, so I think maybe next week we can come back with a final date. So I know you already mentioned when the last week is. So if students require more time, maybe we can give them an extra week and just extend the deadline until the end of August. But we can confirm that next week. Did you say the other question was about the length of their final project or the story map? I don't think we've ever set kind of like a word count or a specific length for the story map. And if you look at some of the projects from last year or the year before that, you'll see that they vary in terms of length and presentation. So I think just keep in mind that you want to keep it interactive and for it to flow in a way so that your readers will want to kind of continue and complete reading the story map. So if it's too text heavy, that might be hard to kind of go through kind of till the end of the story map. And so at the same time, you don't want to have the readers to have to scroll too much to get through all of the content. So there are a lot of cool features. For those who maybe missed the first week, we do have the recording from our story map training available in Google Classroom. So you can watch that again. There are a lot of interesting kind of features you can incorporate to address some of those issues. And during our virtual office hours, we can kind of go through those again if you have any questions. Any other questions or concerns?
I can share one question that I had in my group that I think might be helpful for other people. So Dimitri was mapping out parks in their map and using sketch layers. So I wanted to just go through the difference between a sketch layer and a feature layer in the map viewer. So if you open up the map viewer, you can create a sketch layer, and here is some documentation on how to do that. But basically, these are really useful for if you just want to show the location of things. You can add pop-ups to them, but you can't really save them as a feature layer and do some analysis with them. So if you're looking to sort of map out areas, I would recommend creating a feature layer and adding that to your map instead and doing analysis with that. So I have a link here also of how to create a layer. In step 6 of it, it shows you to create a point layer. But if you're trying to map out big areas of things and you want a polygon layer. So for step 6, instead of choosing a point layer, you want to choose a polygon layer. And I'm just writing this out in the chat so that people have it in case that's helpful for them too.
Great question. Any other questions? You still have some time.
Has everyone settled on their projects and what they're doing? Does anyone want to share the interesting stuff that they're thinking about? Of starting? If not, it's fine too.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Sam.
I guess mine is on like sort of like forecasting climate wars and also like documenting ongoing climate or like resource wars. So I guess what I want to do is sort of identify like the key factors that sort of drive more and also map out like resource scarcity, water scarcity, and then sort of identify hotspots where like resource wars are occurring or like will occur in the future. It's just been a personal topic of interest. And yeah, I'm excited to delve into it.
Laura, would you like to share your idea?
Yeah, so I'm working at something called chinampas that are like a sustainable agriculture system that dates back to the Aztec civilization that is still in practice today, but it's very like endangered because we are losing a lot of territory from the lake that used to be, well, the lake of Tenochtitlan, that was the city of Mexico that was built over that lake. There are still some parts that are remaining, but we are losing like around I don't know how to say it in English, but 6 hectares of land each year. And yeah, it's a very pressing issue because those lakes like are like the remains of what once used to be the lake of Tenochtitlan. So yeah.
The word in English is hectare, which isn't that different from the Spanish word. And it usually is 2.5 acres. Just for anyone who uses acres instead. But it's a large amount of land.
I'm really excited to see everyone's final projects. And as you're developing your narrative or looking for different data sources, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. I think, Tim, if I'm not mistaken, all of our contact info might be somewhere in Google Classroom, so that if there are any data or ArcGIS questions, feel free to reach out to Anella and myself. And we'd be happy to help you.
And posting in the Google Classroom as well notifies us. So if you have any questions, you can add a comment in the stream perhaps, or comment on the classwork, and we will see that as well. So you can feel free to use that as a forum to bounce any questions or any ideas or discussions.
Great, thanks, Tim.
No worries.
Are there any other questions that came up during the breakout sessions that we can help address? Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, perhaps we can end the session a few minutes early. And just a reminder that our next session will be on July 25th, next Tuesday. So we'll see you all then. Thanks so much for joining us today. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.